It's Mahia May.
I'm gonna show y'all how I flip this to this. What's up, y'all? It's your boy Danny Mahia, aka Mahia Made. Today I'm back with another sample flip challenge video. How it works is I'm gonna go to the website samplet.io and I only get 10 chances to find a sample. So let's get into it. Alright, y'all, so I'm here at the website. I'm gonna quickly go through all the 10 samples, and when I find one, I'm gonna get back to y'all. Alright, y'all, so I went through all 10 samples. I ended up coming across this one. So let's head back into FL Studio and take a listen to what it sounds like. Alright, y'all, so let's go ahead and get started with the breakdown. The first thing we're going to start off with is the sample chop. So for this sample, I'm not going to lie, it was a little hard to find a piece that I wanted to chop. This chop pretty much plays throughout the whole beat, is the foundation for the beat. The reason I like these two chops is because it gave me a dark type of vibe. I like the texture from this part of the sample, and I like how the time stretching made it very grainy. So instead of going with my usual Serato sample to chop my sample, I actually used Fruity Slicer. So there's two things I did to this sample. First of all, in order to get that grainy type of effect, I turned up this TS setting all the way up to 200%. And the next thing I did is pitched it down by -2 semitones. And the sample itself was pretty low, so I added this fruity balance over here. I raised it up by 3.5 decibels just to make the sample a little bit more loud. And the second effect I added is this effector silencer to take out some background noise from the sample. And then finally, I deducted some low end all the way up to 90 hertz and took off some of that top end down to 6 kilohertz. So after I had found the part of the sample that I wanted to chop, it was time to start working on the drums. So first thing we have is these hi-hats. For these hats, I kept it super simple. Next up, I added the snare. Next up, I added a rim shot. And then finally, I added this small open hat. And then I added this kick. There is one effect I added for the kick. It's this fruity soft clipper over here. Because the 808 is so distorted, I needed a kick that can really cut through the 808. So in order to add some saturation, I decided to go with this fruity soft clipper. And then finally for the drums, it was of course time to add the 808. So this is the pattern I came up with. So the sample along with the drums, they both sound like this together. So in order to build on top of the sample, I decided to add these chords. So the VST I use for these chords, of course, comes from Retro Machines by Kontakt. I used the Chroma Brass 1 preset. There's two things I did to this preset. The first thing, I lowered the cutoff. And the second thing, I turned up this glide setting. And I also turned on legato and glide so we can get that rising effect. And as we head over to the effects, the first thing I added is this M auto pitch. I actually use this plugin just for this width setting. I turned it up to 0.8 cents. Next up, I wanted to beef up the synth. So I added OTT. I lowered the depth down to 75%, and I also put this upward percentage all the way down to 0. In order for the synth not to clash with the 808, I removed everything under 120 hertz. After I laid out the chords, I knew it was time to start adding some melody to the beat, so I went ahead and added these bells. The VST I use for these bells comes from Hive 2. I use the AZ Lullaby preset. For this sound, I actually consolidated, and originally the beat was 2 semitones lower. So as you guys can see from this pitch setting over here, I did end up shifting every instrument up 2 semitones, including the sample. For this sound, I took off everything under 168 hertz. Next up, y'all know I'm a big fan of texture, so it was time to add some texture. I went ahead and added this sound. The VST I use for this sound comes from Access. I use the Gentle Phase Poly Keys preset. So after I had added these 3 additional layers on top of the sample, I knew the beat was starting to form. So I'm gonna just go ahead and play the sample along with some of the instruments that we have so far. So after I had that first section of the beat, it was time to start moving on to the second section of the beat, which would be considered the verse. I thought it was a good idea just to introduce a different melody, so I want to go ahead and added this sound over here. VST I use for this sound comes from Hive 2 once again. I use the AZ Goals preset. And for this sound, the only thing I did is deduct some of that top end down to 8 kilohertz. Once again, going back to layering, I wanted to make this section a little bit different. And I was starting to hear some Rhodes in my head as I was making the beat. So then I added this sound. And these Rhodes play throughout the entire verse section. VST I use for these Rhodes comes from Kontakt once again. I use the Scarby Mark I library with the Scarby Mark I Stretch Tune preset. For these Rhodes, I wanted to add some texture to it to go along with that texture from the sample. The first plugin I added is Tape Mellowfy. I use the Lo-Fi Quiver preset. The second plugin I added is Pancake 2. I turned up the mix up to 25%. Basically what this plugin does is move your sound from left to right. Because the beat was already sounding really dark, I went ahead and added this tubular bell to play for every 4 bars. And then finally, to make the second part of the verse section a little bit more interesting, but also to add a little bit more attention to the beat, I went ahead and added this piano. So once again, I'm gonna just go ahead and solo out all the instruments that I added for this part of the verse section, just so we can hear what everything is doing. So yeah, you guys, that was pretty much it for this sample flip challenge. I'm gonna go ahead and play the beat in full, just so we can hear everything in context. Alright y'all, so that was it for this week's sample flip challenge. To be honest, it's not one of my favorite flips, but sometimes that's just how it goes with this challenge. It forces me to really work my creativity. With that being said, if y'all gained any type of insight from this video, please leave a like, please leave a comment. It's really going to help the channel grow. If you guys are new to the channel, I put out 4 videos a month. That's 2 beat breakdowns. I break down my own sample, and I also do sample flip challenges just like I did today. So I'm going to catch y'all next week for a new beat breakdown. Until then, stay blessed.